Okay, ladies, gentlemen, fellow Kryptonians out there, we're back with the Superman and Lois Season 4, Episode 7 recap, review, and breakdown. And let's just say that there's huge changes for the Kents moving forward. And I have to admit, I was a bit hesitant at first when watching it initially, thinking about, is this going to be a bit of an in-between episode? Just kind of given that we have no Luthor in it, as we heard that he's just chilling in Metropolis for the meantime. And then we also hear that John Henry Irons is interrogating Otis and has told the Kents that it's only a matter of time until maybe he provides something useful and possibly flips on Luthor, hopefully helping them put him away eventually towards the end of this season. So when you hear all of that, it gets a bit like, sometimes in between episodes don't provide as much crazy plot stuff as one would like to see. But I have to say, episodes like this prove why taking a break like that can ultimately provide a story with this opportunity of a different kind of substance, especially with regards to character service to that of Clark Kent and Superman, to the point of where in this episode it made me feel really grateful for it, as I love nothing more than when this show dives into Tyler Hoechlin's Clark a bit more, giving him the opportunity to bring out that Clark Kent in all of the best ways the show has done before, the lore of Superman in this universe, and just how all of this ties into present day. So this all initially got teased to us at the very beginning of the episode with a flashback, hearing Clark talk about starting out as Superman in Metropolis. It was great seeing Clark being faced with Denise at the store, seeing a plane blow both of its engines on the TV screen, and so he pretends that he's just lost his wallet so he can go back to his car, but really go out and save the plane, but doing it so quick to the point that Denise even doubts if Superman can do it that quickly. And all of this just springboards us into what this episode puts at the center of its exploration. Clark trying to put the genie back in the bottle with the Superman secret, to the point of where he even has a convince he's not Superman list, so we even see him go to Coach Gaines and pretend to be knocked into by the car and in a bunch of pain. We also have one of John and Jordan's old football teammates go up and confront them about being the sons of Superman and always having had powers, and that's how they got on the football team. And although initially he comes across as a bit of a bully, I could still feel for him, and that's what this episode gets into, because the secret has had an impact on his life. He says it ruined his life with regards to obviously his, I guess, maybe football scholarship ambitions, and it even made the boys feel bad a little bit later when they went to his house in an effort to get him off their backs, but it just ended up with his mother wondering if he's using drugs like XK again. So in present day, you're seeing how this secret is putting quite the strain on the Kent family in a number of ways, but in all reality, this has been going back a good 17 years for Clark. Well, at least in these flashbacks, because it goes well beyond that in his life. And this is where we really see how they decide to show that. And that's through introducing, finally, in this show, Jimmy Olsen. So in these flashbacks, Jimmy was putting together the Daily Planet softball team, and everyone wants Clark to join, but because of his upbringing from Jonathan and Martha, really keeping him closed off from sports at school and everything like that, he just doesn't want to draw attention to himself, and he says no. Luckily though, Lois comes up with the idea of him playing terrible, so that's a way he can still somewhat get involved. And so we see Clark in that other flashback later on. I'm just going to connect all these scenes together. He does just that. He like barely taps the ball on the edge of the bat, and man, I love this for so many reasons. I mean, it was really cool seeing Jimmy Olsen with Clark, although this is, quite different in this iteration, as they're clearly not the best of friends, and he doesn't really know his secret right up until the end of this episode. But I'm fine for like new iterations like this, spinning a bit of a different story on it, and if anything, a bit of a tragic story with how Clark somewhat pushed away Jimmy in his personal life, and how he could have had that friend for years and years if things went a bit differently. But for me, mainly, man, just Tyler Hoechlin's Clark Kent. I could never sing his praises enough. The same goes for Elizabeth Tulloch's Lois Lane, but seeing that moment in where he was just really happy because he's never been a part of a team like this before, as his parents, again, were just so restrictive when he was growing up. It's little glimpses like this into the traits that make up Clark Kent and Superman in the Superman and Lois show that they've managed to pull off so well. That just makes me so happy with the effort that they've put into this show through accurately portraying moments like this with Superman, with Clark's struggles, and how he struggled with stuff like this his entire life. And speaking of which, in this episode, the boys are finding this struggle that their dad is having, that they're finding it hard to appreciate because they haven't grown up the exact way he grew up, which is, you know, even when in that part of the episode, Clark went off at them after learning that Candace knows about their whole family secret, which is, you know, very understandable to see how hard it is for him to come to terms with, just because there's so many people in his life that he could have told growing up, for him to just learn that his sons are like, you know, just telling their, you know, 16-year-old friend slash girlfriend. And it's like, to him, it's like, how could you do that? I mean, I'm sure Candace is a lovely person, but you can't guarantee this 16-year-old girl isn't going to get angry at you one day and just go and tell someone. You have to take every consideration into account. But what really laid down this scene even heavier is when Lois comes in and further elaborates that ever since Clark got his powers at 4 years old, so much earlier than the boys, his parents, they meant well, as she said, but they were so hard on him whenever he used his powers. And I think that was a very focal thing to highlight this episode, so I'm really super glad that they included this scene with Lois explaining this, and also that Clark wasn't the one to do it because he might not really want to talk about it this way, or like he might be like remembering it a different way, and my parents were doing the best by me. But Lois can kind of put it a bit more objectively, if you know what I mean. And just with this huge difference that there is here, Jonathan and Jordan got their powers when they were like 15, 16 years old. Now compare that to a 4-year-old who's had it drilled into him throughout his childhood, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, into the teenage years, that if he even used his powers once, that there would be hell to pay, if you know what I mean. So, as Lois says here, keeping the secret is all he's ever known. And sure, this is material and just stuff that we basically already know about Superman, but the way this episode visits that topic and explores it through these flashbacks just was really refreshing to see, especially when it kind of reflects upon the present day situation and how the boys have only, in the grand scheme of things, just come into their own powers and are struggling really with the identity themselves. So as the flashbacks continue, Clark misses yet another game, and Jimmy puts it together that every single time he's missed a game, Superman was out there doing quite a prolific save that managed to get headlines. And just to connect this together, the sad thing that I felt put a really good highlight on the sacrifices that Clark has made, this is just like through his adult life. Imagine like a whole Smallville's shows worth of events that are just like this, like Lana when he was younger, seeing her go off with Kyle, even though it was meant to happen because he ended up with Lois. But you get what I mean there. But it's that later on we get that final flashback, and Clark once again didn't go to the game, the final game that is, and Jimmy admits that he must have been wrong because there was no Superman saves that day. With the sad thing being that he concludes that it must simply be because Clark doesn't really like him that much. And even though Clark is like, no, yeah, I do, or however it went, at some point, you know, in Jimmy's shoes, you would eventually think that if somebody is repeatedly ducking you, saying that there's nothing else to it but avoidance after avoidance after avoidance, like what else are you going to think? And not only that, Superman had to literally abandon saves that day. So, to be honest, this is something that I don't know if the episode fully took into account with what this meant, and maybe I'm nitpicking here, but people's lives could have been in danger, but obviously in an effort to keep that secret going. This could have actually have been a severe sacrifice for Clark to make, not doing high-profile saves that day, because if you think about it for a second, either Clark/Superman was extremely extremely lucky, and across the entire planet, there wasn't any saves that would have been so high profile enough for him to get headlines, or he just actually let them happen. Because before anyone says it, I know you might say, he still went out there and saved some people, sure. But like, they might not have been high profile. What about the high profile saves on the planet that day? He had to kind of miss them out to ensure the secret wasn't discovered by Jimmy. Now, as for other things in this episode, of course, with it being the final season, and as we're more or less getting into the final episodes, guys, we're putting a bit of a close on some of the other characters. So we had some moments with Kyle and Chrissy, and they're looking for a place to live. And Chrissy explores the idea of selling her share of the Gazette, and just as they're about to give up hope on getting the money in time to put an offer on their dream house, Lois and Clark meet up with them in the diner and say that they want to buy her share of the Smallville Gazette and keep her on as co-editor, and even if she wants to buy back her share one day, that door will always be open, which was a really, really nice thing to just set up in the headcanon of the future of this world. Even though we're never going to see future seasons, it's nice to know that's where things will end up, with Chrissy likely buying back her share. Now, right as Kyle is making a toast to the two most kind and loyal people he knows, Mr. Douchebag of the Year walks in. I mean, Candace's dad. And this scene, man, like, oh my god, probably one of the best scenes of the entire show. And you gotta love, by the way, how Superman and Lois keep managing to do that. And what I mean by that is, think about it. There's scenes like this, the previous scene with Candace's dad, for example, or even the clip last episode with Lex versus Clark, that just get clipped around social media with people raving about what this show is doing. And then you have people even asking what show the clip is even from. And this is what I mean when I say that people sleep on Superman and Lois. And I think this will just be another one of them. But back on track here, we have Candace's dad confront Clark about someone telling him that he's Superman, which, we come to find out later was indeed Lex Luthor, as Candace's dad served time with him. And it's just obviously another part of Luthor's plan to kind of harass the Kent family here, cooking in the background while he's chilling in Metropolis in the meantime. Now, Clark gets up in front of the whole diner, and Candace's dad wants to do this right in front of everyone, and he freaking pulls out a gun to prove it himself by saying, well, that there's nothing to worry about, if you're bulletproof and all. And he fires the gun. And guys, the way they executed this scene was just great. Like, time slows down to almost a hold. More or less, all the audio cuts out, which just really puts this whole filter of importance on this scene. As in reality, this is one of the most important moments of Clark's entire life, completely shaking up and destabilizing and just confronting him with an inevitability he never thought he would really have to face, since he's managed to keep it up his entire life so far. So obviously Clark realizes that this is a secret he can't avoid exposing in this moment. And when he comes to terms with all of that, all within the span of a bullet flying at him, he looks at Lois, takes his glasses off, and rips that shirt open so the bullet can hit the Superman crest. I like that little moment when Clark looks at Lois and smiles, as though to kind of tell her it's okay, with the decision that he's made. And what also really kind of got to me in this moment was that little line they decided to add just before the scene cuts, with Superman apologizing to the entire diner for lying to them all for so long. That just kind of made me feel sad, because it's like, Clark, you shouldn't have to apologize for keeping that secret to your, hometown people. I think they would understand, but it's just such a Clark Kent-natured thing to do. Now, at the very end of the episode, Clark figures that Luthor will just keep sending people unless we don't keep it a secret. And this is when Clark says, when Emmett fired that bullet, I started to think that maybe this is doing more harm than good. And to be fair, in any other Superman story, usually, it would mostly remain a secret. There have been other comic book storylines which have explored this, but in this iteration, Luthor quite literally has backed them into a corner, and there's only so much that they can do. And, after all, this is years and years into Superman's career, which is quite a unique, position of a show to tell a story from in his life, which is what I think makes this show so appealing, to put it this far into Lois and Clark's journey. Now, they all as a family acknowledge that this will change everything, putting them all in the spotlight, taking away their chance from having normal lives with no going back after this moment. And to be honest, it's very true. I was even, if you guys tuned into my last review, talking about how it would kind of be similar to the Bizarro world. I mean, maybe not. I mean, I don't see the whole family doing bloody red carpet Superboy and Superman appearances, but I had all kinds of thoughts in my head in how, yeah, like the boys will now be public with their superhero saving days in the future. And I can imagine Clark might be open to doing a documentary one day. Like, not right away, but one day, especially after seeing the interview he does at this moment with the Daily Planet. Now, Janet Olsen hosts the interview with Clark, and Clark talks about the secret, saying you'd be surprised what a pair of glasses will do. And after detailing his past and the recent events that led up to this moment, what he wants the people of the world to know most about him, and I absolutely adored this moment, is that he's just a regular guy. I mean, well, beyond the powers, he's a normal husband and father. And honestly, this message about Superman and who Clark Kent is as a person is what encapsulates how the Superman and Lois show truly understand the character. And if anything, it kind of took me back to that, fantastic Five for Fighting song titled Superman. And I've always loved that song and the lyrics ever since I was a boy, because it's written from Superman's perspective, in how the world thinks of him, in one way as this figure larger than life, a man who just couldn't possibly really have any human struggles. But as we know, beyond the powers, as Clark said here, it's anything but. And in some of the lyrics of that song, it says, "I'm only a man in a silly red sheet," or "It's not easy to be me," when the world probably thinks it's completely easy to be Superman. And I encourage you all to listen to a performance of that song if you haven't heard it already. I mean, everyone here probably already knows it, but again, the lyrics of that song fit perfectly with what this episode explores. Now, after this, we then cut back to Clark getting ready to go to town, but obviously in a new era now, wondering, does he even put on his glasses anymore? And I loved the detail of including his hesitation, like putting it down, almost picking it up again, because it's like, you don't need to, as you don't need to use them, but he literally didn't know whether he should or not, as it's just been a part of who he is his entire life. And then at the very, very end, we get that full circle moment as Clark heads to the diner and meets with Jimmy, and he apologizes and he says, "I missed you too, pal," and they catch up finally. So despite it being an in-between episode, even though it did further along the plot, because this was Luthor's doing at the end of the day, if you couldn't tell already, I thoroughly enjoyed it, because again, it just shows how this show just encapsulates the identity of Superman in a way that I think a lot of people out there sleep on. And eventually throughout the years, more and more people will watch this show for the first time and just realize that, like we are right now. Now, the promo for next episode, well, let's just play that here.
Lois Lane claims to be a champion for justice. I challenge her to come here and debate me face to face.
If he thinks I will not confront him on camera,
Lois,
my reputation is at stake.
this needs to work.
After today, the whole world is going to be on your side.
Now, I'm very excited for next episode, because despite what I said earlier, it really does feel like we're changing gear again, and we're hitting the gas. Now, Luthor has now shaved, and the title of this episode, I think, is Sharp Dressed Man, and look at the suit getup that he has here. He's gone full-on Luthor mode now, and since he's, put his daughter behind him and he's lost Doomsday, as I've said quite a few times now, he's got like full conviction to strip down the Kent family, Lois, Superman, at any costs. And it looks like Amanda has set him up with a new method with the press in an effort to dismantle Lois Lane's credibility, with her saying, "After today, the whole world is going to be on your side," with Luthor then saying to what it seems to be a recording, so it goes out there on the TV screens, "Lois Lane claims to be a champion for justice. I challenge her to come here and debate me. And we hear Lois then saying in the trailer, I mean, if he thinks I will not confront him on camera, you know, my reputation is at stake. But you know that Luthor is going to have an ace up his sleeve with regards to being able to win this debate on TV. So I think Lois will feel confident going in, but he's going to pull out some surprise that will make her look pretty bad and probably have something to do with, you know, how she sent him away for a crime that he didn't commit. Now, meanwhile, it looks like Clark is going to be doing some public saving in Smallville, which I can imagine will feel pretty weird for him, just, you know, not having anything to hide anymore. And we see that this brick gets sent through the window of the Smallville Gazette with the word liar. Now, this is likely a repercussion of the interview that Luthor's done from a Luthor supporter. So with what Amanda teased in the promo, it could be true with how they're starting to win the hearts of some of the public over to Luthor's side, to the point of throwing bricks into Lois's place of work, calling her a straight up liar. And like, I'm just thinking, man, they need to get that proof from Otis and the whole Doomsday thing to dismantle Luthor for once and for all. And again, what I'm enjoying most about this is, other than some educated guesses with what we've got going on right now, I don't know how he's going to be taken down. And what I meant by what I just said is, sure, they might be able to flip some people like, not Gretchen, whatever her name was, and Otis, but like, they're going to need more. I can't imagine it's just going to be that. So I would love to know any theories you have going into the episodes ahead. And of course, let me know what you thought of episode 7 down in the comments below. But if you guys got to this part of the video, I would greatly appreciate a like. Consider sharing it out there. Consider subscribing for more videos just like this. But I'm gonna love you and leave you now. Get to editing this. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.